ended up at this point was because we're talking about the image of the beast in Revelation 13. And, we brought up the question a couple of weeks ago, do we see this image language anywhere else in the Bible? And lo and behold, it's on the first page. God created man in his image. And then so we asked the question, are those two ideas connected? And we went through a little study of the Old and New Testament. And for the sake of time, I think those two terms are connected. They use the same Greek word in Revelation, and then in the Septuagint, that same word is used. So there is a connection there. And then, so after we saw there was a connection between those two passages, some questions start popping up. If there's an image made in the likeness of the beast, what does that mean? Because we know that humans are made in the image of God. So what could possibly be made in the image of the beast? Is it a modified humanity? And so that begs the question of then, what does it mean to be human? Or what does it mean to image God? And that's what we talked about last week, and I brought up a couple points from Dr. Heiser's book. He had an article, and I think I sent the link yesterday.
Yep.
To his article, What Does It Mean to Be Human? And he says there in the opening paragraph that the stage is set for this question to become one of this century's greatest challenges to the church. And then we went on and we looked at, what does it mean to bear God's image? And we ultimately came to the conclusion that, being made in God's image means that we are his representatives, on earth. And to be human is to image God. Mm-hmm. So this idea of transhumanism, what is it? It's been talked about for decades, believe it or not. The term transhumanism, as we'll see, dates back to the 1950s. And I'm trying to move my camera or my picture. And so I came across some stuff of like transhumanism. And then I started to wonder, does this play a part? Is this possibly what could be referred to as the image of the beast? Is it tied to transhumanism? In order to understand that, or to say whether or not that is true, we have to understand what transhumanism is first. And this is from an article I can't remember what journal it was in, but this was in 2003. Wow. This guy with a PhD named Nick Bostrom, he says transhumanism is a loosely defined movement that has developed gradually over the past 2 decades. It promotes an interdisciplinary approach to understanding and evaluating the opportunities for enhancing the human condition and the human organism opened up by the advancement of technology. Attention is given to both present technologies like genetic engineering and information technology, and anticipated future ones such as molecular nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. And so this was in 2003. So that molecular nanotechnology is here. And then the artificial intelligence, it's here.
2003.
Yeah. So he was talking about them being in the future, but I think we're,
The future
things
is now.
so fast that we see it now. History of transhumanism. So the term transhumanism can be traced all the way back to the 1950s.
Oh, come on.
And the person that coined that term was a guy named Julian Huxley. He was a biologist. He believed in evolution. His brother, you may have heard of his brother's book, A Brave New World.
Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley. Yep, that's his brother. And so he says in his book, New Bottles for New Wine, he says the human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself, not just sporadically, an individual here in one way, an individual there in another way, but in its entirety as humanity. We need a name for this new belief. Perhaps transhumanism will serve. Man remaining man, but transcending himself by realizing new possibilities of and for his human nature. So he was sort of visionary, I guess, in a sense, even though he was a biologist, scientist, you know, he was kind of looking far off into the future of what, you know, our species might look like. And then again, from Bostrom's article on transhumanist values, this is kind of what their vision is. You know, if you could sum up what transhumanists believe, you know, they believe in longevity, you know, that that humans in the future are going to live for a really long time, that will be basically free of disease, you know, and it's not, and I don't think it's because they do away with disease. I think that's part of it, but I think in their mind, our bodies can withstand any type of disease. Elimination of unnecessary suffering, and then the augmentation of human intellectual, physical, and emotional capacities. So they think that the capabilities of the human mind will be modified or altered in a way to where we have like superhuman intelligence, you know, where artificial intelligence and the human mind are kind of meshed together. And of course, the physical components to this, I think what they envision is, you know, you don't like something about yourself, you could change it. And we kind of already see this, you know, with like celebrities and whatnot. You know, they change their looks with, you know, plastic surgery or whatever. They look like completely different people. But I think it extends even beyond that. You know, is there? Well, we'll get into that later. These ideas are so prevalent now and require so much attention that there's an actual journal now dedicated to transhumanism, and there's a journal. It's called the Journal of Posthuman Studies. So they've created an actual journal where people write, you know, articles, and they're peer reviewed, and it says that this journal seeks to address these transhumanist ideas and, you know, things like that. And then this is just like one component, I believe, of transhumanism. Transhumanism encompasses a lot of different things. And I think this particular thing called CRISPR, or CRISPR-Cas9, I believe it plays a part in the future of humanity. And, you know, that's not, I should say that's not what I think. That's what people are saying. That's what the scientists are saying, that, you know, this is revolutionary and groundbreaking for the future of humanity. And and we talked about it this summer, but CRISPR is it's like a DNA editing technique, I guess, or I'm not sure what exactly you want to call it. And it's been around for less than 10 years. It was only developed back in 2012 by two scientists, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier. And then last year in 2020, they won a Nobel Prize in chemistry for their work with CRISPR. And basically what CRISPR-Cas9 is it's like in our DNA is made up of a sequence of letters, basically, are strands of DNA. Each strand represents a letter, I believe. And there's a certain sequence that we see in our DNA. And sometimes these sequences can be prone to disease or things like that. And, you know, our DNA is what makes us unique, which makes us who we are. And so they were studying the DNA, I believe, of bacteria. And they were, because bacteria, they have immune systems too, just like we have an immune system. And so they would take a strand of DNA and attach it to this protein, I think it's called a protein Cas9, and they would inject it into the body. And that strand of DNA would go find the faulty DNA or the DNA that had a disease, and it would attach itself to that particular strand. So it's very accurate, and it would cut out the bad part and input the new DNA. And it's basically, you know, cut and paste.
Yeah. Wow.
It's actually very simple, and it's very accurate. The one scientist, Jennifer Doudna, she says that gene editing is going to shape our future in many ways. And so she says it's important that it's understood by everyone and not just the scientists. And then there's a guy, he's writing a biography on her. He wrote a biography, I believe, on Steve Jobs. So he's kind of well known. He's doing one on her called The Code Breaker. And then the subtitle is Jennifer Doudna, Gene Editing and the Future of the Human Race. So that's what these people are saying. You know, this is a big thing. Like, they're saying this is the future, and it's going to shape our future. And someone pointed out that her last name, the last three letters are DNA, which is weird.
I noticed that.
Kind of strange. Maybe we'll just watch this video and then we'll call it good.
Okay.
Let's talk about gene editing and its potential to change lives. It's because of CRISPR, a technology that's not even 10 years old and can basically perform surgery on our genes. The inventors got a Nobel Prize for it in 2020. CRISPR fans say it'll fight diseases and improve crops. Other people, well, Hollywood tapped into their fears a long time ago.
Genetics, what can it mean? The ability to perfect the physical and mental characteristics of every unborn child.
At least one scientist has crossed the line.
There will be someone somewhere who's doing this. If it's not me, it's someone else.
So how does gene editing actually work? Can CRISPR be used to cure disease? And how far should we be allowed to go in transforming the human race? Genes are the blueprint for making everything the body needs, and human beings have more than 20,000 of them. Genes are made up of DNA, and that instructs the cell how to make a protein. Those proteins carry out the functions of the body and determine the way we look. But some gene variations can make us sick. Scientists, though, may now have the unprecedented power to change those genes. It's all because of the work done by two Nobel Prize-winning scientists, Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna. What they discovered has unleashed a whole new era of genetic engineering that's advancing just about every day. The tool is called CRISPR-Cas9, and like so often happens in science, they discovered it by chance. Charpentier and Doudna were studying how bacteria protect themselves from viruses, because yes, bacteria get sick too. They found that bacteria have a part of their DNA called CRISPR that stores tiny pieces of a virus's DNA. A copy of that bacterial CRISPR DNA is made the next time the virus comes back. Small parts of the copy then join up with a protein called Cas9. So CRISPR-Cas9 goes looking for that matching bit of DNA in the virus, latches onto it, and through a chemical reaction, it snips the viral DNA to destroy it. It's why scientists describe CRISPR-Cas9 as a pair of genetic scissors. So Charpentier and Doudna then thought, why can't we harness that same natural process, but program it to cut out genes that are faulty and replace them with healthy ones? That was the light bulb moment.
When the papers first came out, the buzz in the academic community was truly palpable. This actually could really change a lot of things in society very soon.
It's simple to use and cheap, and that makes it revolutionary because it could treat, perhaps even cure, genetic diseases like muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, even cancer. And a lot of attention has been on sickle cell disease. In fact, scientists have already used it on a woman named Victoria Gray. She was the first person in the US to receive a CRISPR-based treatment for the disease. Doctors infused her with more than 2 billion of her own genetically edited bone marrow cells. More than a year later, almost all her symptoms are gone. Just to be clear, CRISPR is being used here like any other medical treatment. Any genetic changes stay with that patient. They aren't passed on to their children. They're not hereditary changes that affect the human gene pool forever. That's because scientists are fixing faulty genes in somatic cells, basically all the cells in our bodies except the single-cell sperm and egg. And it's important to point out the patient is an adult who's consented to the treatment. But some are suggesting using CRISPR on early embryos to make the genetic fix. And for a lot of safety and societal reasons, scientists say that's a step too far. But that didn't stop a Chinese scientist from going there. In 2018, He Jiankui announced the birth of the world's first CRISPR-modified babies, twin girls known only as Lulu and Nana.
I understand my work will be controversial, but I believe family need this technology.
There was outrage.
No babies should be born at this point in time following the use of this technology. It's simply too early, too premature.
He had altered a gene to try to protect them from HIV because their father has AIDS. But he did it while the girls were still in a petri dish. And that's why his use of CRISPR technology is a problem. He genetically altered what are called germline cells, the sperm, the egg, or in the case of the twin girls, a fertilized egg at the single cell stage. Changes to DNA here appear in every cell in a person's body. You might say that's an efficient fix, but those genetic changes are permanent and are passed on to future generations. Plus, this is uncharted territory. Scientists say there's a very real risk that an edit could cause a mutation in the genome with side effects that we just can't predict. There's also the issue of consent. The girls obviously had no say in the changes made to their bodies.
Editing the germline was really a bright line that should not be crossed. He Jiankui took it upon himself to move ahead with a very controversial and troubling application of this technology.
That experiment alone raised the specter of designer babies, making people smarter, stronger, maybe more attractive.
It would likely only be available to people with significant means or wealth. And this has the potential to really increase inequality in our society.
So what's being done to regulate it? 75 countries already prohibit the use of CRISPR in human reproduction, but many scientists and governments agree more rules are needed. Right now, we have an international commission that started to draft some guidelines.
There are significant differences among scientists on whether and when heritable genome editing should be used. There really needs to be a chance for broad public and societal conversations to think about whether we want to use this technology at all.
None of that, though, has stopped scientists from experimenting with CRISPR, in plants and animals at least. So what happened to the man who did interfere? Well, He Jiankui was sentenced to 3 years in prison and banned from working on reproductive medicine for life. And the twin girls, no one really knows where they are or whether they're healthy. We don't even know who else in the world is trying this technology. There's a good chance someone will misuse it and potentially change the human race. That's enough to want to bury this technology. But CRISPR has enormous potential to transform some people's lives without hurting anyone else. That's a power people just won't want to ignore.
Oh my goodness.
So, pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah.
I think things are a lot more, scientifically speaking, advanced than I guess what's out there, like what's common knowledge, I should say.
When is that, Scott? When did the Chinese scientists did it?
When did he what?
The Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
When did he?
When did he do that?
Yeah.
I think it was like in, let's see, 2018 or 2019. Because I think those girls that were born are like 2 or something, 2 years old.
Nobody knows.
They said that the Chinese government, he's supposed to spend 3 years in prison and he's barred from ever practicing, stuff again. But my guess is he's probably, the Chinese government probably took him and he's working underground somewhere on doing it for the government now or something.
Creating superhumans.
Yeah. And I think that this technology, this is just my opinion. I think that the stuff that we know about, like that we're watching this video, this is like, we're probably about 10 or 20 years behind the technologies that are out there right now, at least in secret, probably with, governments and whatnot. My guess is they've probably known about this for a while, but now that the public knows about it, it's probably, I would say it's an educated guess that, a lot of these technologies are a lot more advanced than what the news is telling us.
Yeah, I think it's all like everything is been in use by the government for a long period of time before it comes out to us, and then it's like it's here, new and whatever, but it's already been operation or being worked on.
Yeah, Lori was telling me she read something last night that they were saying the voice recognition stuff.
Yeah,
they were like the FBI and stuff. They were using that like back in the 80s. It was just slower than what we with Siri and the Google thing and the Amazon thing that people have in their homes that they talk to and it recognizes voices. Like they're saying that technology existed back in like the 1980s. It's just a little slower, but the technology existed, nonetheless. So who knows how advanced it really is.
Isn't it similar also with the movies like Jason Bourne when they are trying to edit, create superhuman?
Yeah.
And there are experiments also with robotics.
Yep. Yeah. I think there's a lot of it's tough to say with like these movies and stuff how much is truth and then how much is like them fiction. It is just a story in fiction, or how much they're maybe trying to condition us for these things.
Well, Scott, when those James Bond movies of the past, nobody would believe that those gadgets are are going to be a reality.
Yep.
But now nobody watches that anymore, because but this one, what you have shown us tonight, is something really far serious,
Yeah.
because it's the human being that is being altered.
Mhm.
Wow.
And that's a question I think everybody is asking too, is like both the scientists and I believe, some of the Christians that think about these things, how far is too far?
Yeah.
How who says when we're done? When we've modified ourselves so much, what's the end? What does the end look like? And some scientists and scholars, they don't use the term transhuman, they use the term post-human.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, which then implies that not human.
Yeah.
And so how much can we tinker with what makes us human before we're considered not human anymore? And I think at this point nobody has an answer nobody has an answer for where that line is at.
Scott, let's stop here.
Yep.
I'm still trembling. Okay. So Saturday, can you do a recap? And
Yeah.
this is something that we cannot rush. We have to think through this, and I don't know what to say, but is this even being discussed in churches, in Christian circle, about this thing? How do you know of any other Christian group?
Yeah, there's some
having a conversation like this.
There's some. Actually, what led me down this path was Myra had sent Lori a video from Prophecy Watchers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gary Stearman.
Yeah.
That's who it is, right? Gary Stearman.
Yeah.
And he had a guy on talking about this. It was his name is Billy Crone, I think. Yeah. I'm not too familiar with him one way or the other. But Lori Myra had sent her the video. This was like in the summertime, and I think it was last summer. Anyways, I heard her watching it on her phone, and I was like, what are you watching? And she said, oh, Myra sent me this video. And I was like, hey. She's like, you want to watch it with me? I was like, sure. Because it sounded interesting. And he was talking about this CRISPR cat. That was the first time I had ever heard of it. It's called CRISPR. And he was talking about how, it's gene editing. And apparently he has this whole series of videos, documentary videos. I haven't watched them. And he was saying, so we were watching it, what they were doing, and then we paused it, and I looked at Lori, and I was like, well, if this is true, if they really can do this, how much can they mess around before we're not considered human anymore? And so we keep watching, and then, well, he says he met someone on a scientist on a plane, and they did this. They worked with CRISPR, or they were starting to, or something like that, and they said it would only be like less than 1% before we would not be considered human anymore.
Oh boy.
Which makes sense because they say we share 90-something% of our DNA with chimps or something like that. And so we wouldn't have to alter, percentage-wise anyway, we wouldn't have to alter too much before we're not considered human. And so anyways, that's how I got led down this path, and then I think, I can't remember if he did or how the image of the beast came up in my mind. I can't remember if I stumbled on that on my own or if that was part of the video too. I can't remember, but yeah, he is. I got and we'll talk about this in a couple weeks, but there's a book by a guy named Carl Teichrieb, and it's a big old book. And he talks about the transhumanism and a little bit of transhumanism and the idea of enchantment. That's where I get this idea. That's what we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks, this enchantment idea that the transhumanist movement isn't just scientific, you know, it's not just coming from, you know, we think because it's coming from the scientific community that, you know, there's probably a bunch of evolutionary atheists that are pushing it, but that's not the case. People that are envisioning this post-human utopia are generally spiritual people.
Yep.
You know, and he said he sums this book up as in one sentence, and he says that humanity has three great desires: to be as God, to be masters of meaning and destiny, to build heaven on earth. And that's basically what his book is about. And he goes through like culturally how we got to this point that we're at now. And so
That's
he's a Christian guy.
That's Scott, the first 10 chapters, that the first 12 chapters of the book of Genesis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what you know his sentence describes.
Yeah.
Pretty much the Tower of Babel.
And the Garden of Eden, you know,
Yep.
becoming like God.
Yep. You know, the first lie is going to be the last lie, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to be sold to us is like we can change who we are, you know, for our betterment.
Okay.
You know, and so he's talking about it. Dr. Heiser's talking about it. So there are people within the Christian community that, you know, see this as something to watch out for, I guess.
Scott, I have a question.
Mhm.
Because in your past teachings, you mentioned about reversing Mount Hermon.
Oh, that's that's
So
another.
where did that come from? Like, is there a book that teaches about that Mount Hermon? You
Yeah.
said that they had the
Yeah.
pact. What book would that be?
Dr. Heiser's.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm trying not to. It's this one. And then it goes through, I guess what the point of this book was to go through the New Testament and show where Genesis chapter 6 is kind of like the theme of particular parts in the New Testament, whether it's the Gospels, like things Jesus did, things Jesus said, places Jesus went. They were all pointing back to Genesis chapter 6, that he was coming to undo what happened there in Genesis 6.
Because it looks like it's again the Mount Hermon.
Yeah.
Going back to Mount Hermon.
Mm-hmm. And I was gonna put this in the study, but I need a little bit more evidence before I do that. But like my thinking is that, you know, the very first message of the gospel that we see is in Genesis chapter 3, that God tells the serpent that the seed of the woman is going to crush his head, but he's going to bruise his heel. And then a couple chapters later is when we get in Genesis chapter 6, the sin of the watchers and the Nephilim. And so we've went over that story before. One thing that we haven't covered is why. What was the purpose of it? What was the purpose? And one of the ideas that I have floating out there is that they were trying to prevent the Messiah from coming. You know, I think they were trying to mess with our DNA, our bloodlines. But then I can't make that statement because I don't know if the Nephilim, if they had children. I've never come across anything that says that they reproduced and had children, or how much it would even take for them to, you know, mess with the human genome.
Yep.
You know, that is one theory that's out there, is that they were trying to pollute the human genome to prevent the seed of the woman from showing up. And we know that didn't happen, that Jesus came, he died, he resurrected. And so now the best that they can do is to alter our humanity, you know, what makes us human, in order to nullify what Jesus did on the cross, that it wouldn't be, that it couldn't apply to us because we're no longer human.
Yeah.
You know, that seems to be the case to me, and that seems to be what's going on here, is they're trying to erase our humanity or alter our humanity in such a way, or just enough, in order to make what Jesus did on the cross ineffectual for us. I think that's the end game.
Yeah. So let's wind up. And Scott, Saturday, we're looking forward if you could do a recap, just a brief recap, and then move on. And what I can do now is really encourage others to go through the last two, you know, the other one last time and this one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.